Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today's session is all about helping you make sense of AI and how we can work with your business. We'll walk through some key ideas and give you a practical starting point for adopting AI securely and effectively. This is just the beginning. We'll be doing more webinars in this series, so stay tuned. And if you're wondering how to implement what we covered today, our team's here to help. If you have any questions during the session, please drop them in the chat at any time. We'll try to answer all of them throughout the session or at the end. And if there's something you'd rather ask privately, feel free to reach out to us after the session. With that, I'll hand it over to our speakers to introduce themselves and get started. Take it away, Elliot.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Elliot Eliason from Pax8. My title is a Product AV Solutions Consultant. That is just a fancy title for Microsoft guy, here to advocate for Microsoft and some of these different solutions that Base Data is supporting. Really happy to be here with Sean, one of the most knowledgeable and excited about AI individuals I've run across. I think we're in for a really great session today, but I'll let Sean introduce himself as well.
Hello, everyone. I am Sean Sanker Jr., Principal Solutions Architect. Fancy title for I build things, I program things, and I help other people do the same. I'm looking forward to diving into this stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, before we get started, things kicked off, just want to talk a little bit about what we're looking to get into today. We're going to talk about preparing for AI. What do we need to do to make sure that we can utilize these tools effectively? Talk about an effective utilization of this. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the Microsoft offerings around Copilot for M365 and Copilot Studio. Then we're going to end here with talking about how Base Data can help you in this journey moving forward. But before we get things kicked off on that content, we want to have a little quick question for everyone and ask in a poll, what kind of AI tools potentially do you already use here today?
Or if you happen to be a software engineer, maybe you use Anthropic's tools, Claude, Sonnet, Opus.
There are quite a few out there, Sean. So that's one thing, that other category can be pretty big on that side, right? All right. I think we've maybe given enough time on these poll responses on this side. Looking like, quite a few utilizing some Copilot. 40% are using some Gemini. See some ChatGPT usage kind of matching up to a Copilot. Small bit in other, and then a few of you here have not used any AI tools. So I think all perspectives are welcome here. So glad to see we kind of have a breadth of views on this side. Pretty interesting. But let's turn over to Sean here to give a little bit of a definition of AI and all these different tools that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, so essentially, the way I think of AI, and the way it's defined in the scientific definition, generally is approximating human intelligence. We don't have humans in a box. We aren't using, wet lab kind of stuff. We have an algorithm that's approximating human intelligence using a bunch of weights and tuned training data, specifically crafted to produce the best generalization possible. And within the whole field of AI, there's machine learning. Within machine learning, there's natural language processing. And within there are the large language models that have become the massive titans of the industry that we're working with. You can think of machine learning as generally algorithms using data to make predictions. Natural language processing is the field of how computers can reason with and think in quotations, words, language, be it text or audio. And then large language models are a specific application within the natural language processing field for large, deeply dense neural networks. You usually interact with them in text, but they do actually support audio and video. In some of these cases, images. Those are more of like the image generation, the multimodal, you put a picture into ChatGPT and paste it. But I think a lot of what we see is just the standard text LLMs, and that's just a big fat neural network with a bunch of nodes. Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the fun thing about that AI definition, sometimes people have different ones, but all of them kind of come together to talk about, whatever AI you might define it as, how can we prepare for this, right? I think whenever you see, negative things out there about, hey, what is a success rate with AI? A lot of it comes down to, I'm just going to fiddle with things and hope I figure it out at the end, which sometimes isn't bad, right? We want you to test things and feel better, but really coming together and having a strategy and preparing for this is what's matters, right? And so when you go back to your organization, I think it's really important to figure out a couple different things, right? What is our goal when we're using AI? If we're just trying to solve every single problem under the sun, or just this very not specific ideas on that side, sometimes we find not a lot of success, right, with AI. Understanding, what those goals, what those pain points would be. We're spending too much time on these simple tasks. I like to call them kind of pass the butter tasks, something that's very simple that can be repeated by one of these large language models or one of these AI systems when we're going to talk about. And then the rest of it comes down to more on data strategy and infrastructure, right? If we don't have the data that these tools can utilize, we're not going to get the results we're looking for. And the same thing is if we don't have the organizational infrastructure, both people-wise on supporting the training, learning more about these tools, making sure people are interacting with the tool effectively. Again, that's where we could find a lot of failure points when we're preparing to work with AI. So, take that away with your organization. I always like to have, a member of each portion of each piece of the department to, weigh in, work with these different tools to understand what are our pain points, what's the most important, and prioritize those different goals. And then again, I think what Base Table will be able to do is understand what are the data strategies you have in place, how can they help you improve those, and then give you that physical infrastructure to go along with, cloud infrastructure to go along with, learning internally for your users on this side. So as you go through this, think about this like these 3 simple checklists, right? How do we empower your employees who are doing this? For those who, I think there's a few that had none, you've never worked with AI tool, maybe that's a place where you start working with some of those AI tools to better understand how do I prompt, how do I get the results I'm looking for. I think we have some fun examples of how that can go sideways, so it's always really important to train that human element. Then it comes to standardizing those practices. Hey, these are the AI tools we're going to use internally. I think one of the craziest things I find is that 70% of users are using the AI tool, even if their company doesn't agree with those policies. So setting that policy and having that standardized practice really leads to success. And again, I'll probably say this a few times, organize that business data. We don't want these powerful tools to go find bad information and then give you those bad results later on. Sean, I think you've kind of experienced some of those things before on your side. I think I talk a little bit about how important that last piece is. Absolutely.
So
Awesome.
essentially the tricky thing about this is AI is a fuzzy tool, right? The way I described it is that AI approximately emulates human intelligence. It's not a human. We don't have actual people in, various call centers that are answering your ChatGPT queries. It's just trying its best. And because of that, it is difficult in some ways to get good results. I've seen a lot of people use AI and find it to be disappointing. I asked it to solve my problem. I said, here is the problem. I want to figure out the route to happiness and everything in the universe. And it just told me that I should walk more and love the people around me. And that didn't help me solve my problem. Well, what's tricky about AI is what you put into it drives deeply in both a literal and less than literal way what the output is. And what I mean by that is if you put typos into your prompt for the AI, it is shown that you will actually get worse results because what an AI does at the end of the day is its next token prediction. It's taking what you said and then it's saying, what's the most likely thing to come after this? What is the sun? The sun is a large orb of plasma in the sky. It's going token by token. So there are good ways to use AI and there are bad ways. And if we could grab the next slide. What is this describing? I purchased a single curved yellow fruit that is known for its high potassium content. I selected one based on its minimal bruising and projected shelf life for short-term nutritional use. What? That's a lot of words. Okay, can anyone guess in chat what we're talking about? I'll give it a few seconds if anyone wants to give a good guess. 3, 2, 1.
I'm seeing some winners out there.
But it took you a second to figure out what that was, didn't it? Right? That's a pretty hefty explanation of what I did. I bought a banana. Could we go to the next slide here? Yeah, I bought a banana. You can say some unit of information in very different ways, and AI does this as well. In a lot of ways, AIs are trained to give you good responses. When was the last time you typed into an AI, asked a question, and it said, no? Or it said, yeah, that's a tricky one. They are specifically crafted and trained to produce a lot of content. And so how you prompt it is critically important. Next slide. where we're going to focus on this just right now. We don't have all the time in the world. We can't cover everything. We can't cover every single good prompt, good techniques, how to do prompt for software engineering, how to do prompts for bioinformatics work, how to do prompts for figuring out how to have better mindfulness in your life. There's a lot of stuff we can cover here, a lot of different structures and ways that we can do it. But I've just, I want to focus on one thing I've seen a lot in the news, which is work slop. I'm sure y'all have seen the articles, heard it on the podcast, seen it on the news. What is work slop? I have some words up here, but generally what it constitutes is an individual who is, one might say, improperly using AI. And what do I mean by that? Well, they usually have the best intentions, right? They're just trying to be helpful. They are trying to contribute. And so what they'll do is maybe let's pretend that everyone's using proper AI policies and acceptable use policies and aren't copy pasting internal chats into ChatGPT. Some people do. A lot of people do. You shouldn't do that. You should use internal tools, and there's a little bit more about that later. But they'll take the chat, they'll paste it in, and say, hey, here's the chat. What are 10 different ways that we could try to do this thing? So say, for example, it's, let's think of a good example. Anyone have a fun thing that they're working on? I'll try to think off the top of my head. We want to run Oh, I see a hand. I'll jump to that in 1 second. We want to run, for example, a marathon, right? We're planning a marathon. I don't know why we're doing this, but we're doing this. What are 10 different ways or 10 different things that we can do in this marathon? That can produce a lot of results, but it's not always targeted and it lacks context. Context is the most important thing. If you just say, I'm running a marathon, what are 10 different things that we can do to prep? What is the marathon for? Is it centered around one specific type of subject? Are we trying to achieve some fundraising goal? Are we doing a marathon for fun? Is it for a charity? The amount of information and context you put in is proportional to the quality of the output. And one other key detail here is that when you ask an AI to do something, it's going to do it. If you say, give me 5 reasons that I shouldn't exercise, AI will gleefully give you 5 reasons, right? It might say at the end, though I do note that it's probably a good idea to exercise. Earlier models didn't do that. But what you ask AI to do, it will almost always do. A better question to prompt it with would be, is it a good idea to exercise? How should I exercise? Should I exercise at all? These are sort of open-ended questions. AI will follow whatever thread you lead it onto, and it is critical to make sure that you are prompting it well. And I did see a hand, but I think we've lost the hand. Tyler, did you want to come up here and ask a question? It's not too late. 3, 2, no. Okay. So no worries. Essentially, hold on. If we could go to the next slide. Work slop ends up creating a lot more work for the people around you, because what happens is someone said, I want to run a marathon. And then say you, or maybe your coworker, has pasted in 7 paragraphs. Those 7 paragraphs have a lot of words, but not a lot of, say, signal. There's a lot of noise and not a lot of signal, and it creates a lot of work for other people. The way that you can avoid that is clear content around what you're doing, clear rationale for the message, right? Hey, I'm running a marathon. What shouldn't I miss? Or this is 3 paragraphs that I've sent about content. Now, could you analyze this and see if I have any gaps in my logic? These are good use cases, right? And generally, don't let the AI think for you. Have the AI help you think through things. Don't delegate all the thinking to the AI. The other issue about delegating thinking to the AI is if you do that, well, you don't actually know whether or not the content is good because you've turned off the critical thinking skills. You've told the AI to think for you, and then you just pass it along. You end up with something that you haven't reviewed. So I guess the other key detail is read through the message and think to yourself, am I contributing and adding to this conversation? Or am I just adding a lot of noise here? And one other thing that we're not going to really get into here is if you have a coworker that's doing that, do know that they are just trying to help. No one ever does this maliciously. They are attempting to help. And so maybe there could be a whole separate discussion around how to have a nice conversation if you're a manager, say with your team, if you're a coworker with that coworker, depends on the rapport, but at least come from a point of they're just trying to help, and maybe you could share some information like what's said here and how to have that conversation in a healthy way rather than, hey, can you stop doing this? This is really annoying. Say, hey, I see you're trying to help here. Maybe we could work on prompting techniques together. That could be a positive way to do it. So that is that.
Yeah, I think that leads right into like what does an effective prompt look like on this side? And again, a lot of these, rhyme with, overall AI policies. What's the goal? What's our goal? What's the context of us asking, this with the large language model? What's my expectation of the result I'm going to get back? And then again, what is that data source that we're pulling this information from? And should, this Copilot be used in this situation? That's where our human judgment, as Shauna just talked about, comes in. And is so important. I'd be able to prompt these tools effectively is how we get those good results and don't burden our other colleagues with work slop and actually get results that we can take action on. And let's show you an example of I think a great prompt that Microsoft has out there, but really if we look at this, you'd saying, hey, let's generate these bullet points, prepare me for a meeting with this client, discuss whatever part of the campaign we're working on. It's telling the Copilot tool where am I going to focus on to pull that information and then give them the expectation of the tool of what you're looking for. So really, this will be a gold standard of what you're looking for when you're interacting with a tool, not just Copilot, but any AI tool out there. Those four things are really what's effective. And I think if you work on this internally and work on this individually, this is where you're going to find a lot more value come out of working with whatever AI tools you have. And really, like I said, it's having those different things together that kind of is the secret sauce on this side. Anything you want to add on that one, Sean, from your experience?
The only thing that so we could have an entire talk just around prompting, genuinely. Key detail here is the purple, the source, is highly contextual based upon where you are using this AI. For Copilot, that source is really helpful. That lets the internal agent route and narrow down the data sources it should be fetching from. If you're using, say, Claude or ChatGPT, your mileage may vary. But when you're using Copilot, that is critical. And one other note that I think is maybe high level helpful to add, the more the merrier, right? The more context you can provide about the situation you're in, where are we? Why are we? What are we? Who are you in the context of this? I am a principal solutions architect. I am trying to figure out how to deploy an LLM in a scalable way to AWS. I have resources available for ECS, Fargate, FSX, right? The more data you can give, the better. Even if you end up rambling, that's okay. So long as it's relevant context, typos are okay. I would recommend you get rid of the typos, but this is a great condensed example of how to give a short one. The longer, the better, usually. Every rule has exceptions, right? But so long as you're not going to do millions of tokens of context. Can Copilot read handwritten attachments to emails? Elliot, I believe that's a yes.
Yes, a lot of times though, the best practice there is have that in your OneNote. A lot of times it's built for, but it can from email as well on that side. Yeah, I think that's something that Microsoft released in their last wave on that one. So the answer is yes to that question. Absolutely. Which is great because I have some terrible handwriting. So it's glad that I was able to pull that documentation up on that side. But good question. Good question. I think that leads us to Microsoft Copilot, right? And a bit of a Microsoft homer, being on the Backstage Microsoft team on the side, but I think there's some really good reasons to, make it a consideration, right? I'm sure we've all seen Microsoft's marketing, Super Bowl ads, different things on that side, but I think why it matters is just, as we talked about before, data security and where the data sources are coming from, as well as that, a lot of what we're working with Copilot in are applications that we work with every day, right? We just had a question about, Outlook, right? I think, being able to go through and pull information from Outlook, help you prepare for a meeting. Let me give you an example on that one. We will on the next slide is, really if I'm meeting with Sean, we've had a number of email exchanges to prepare for this presentation. I can go through, ask Copilot to summarize, hey, what are the last 5 conversations me and Sean have had by email? What are the action items that's open on Elliot's side? What's open on Sean's side? Really can be, an AI assistant, right? Help you prepare for different things, help you prepare for different things on that side. And Power BI, there is a way for Copilot to work with Power BI, but it is additional licensing on top of what Copilot for M365. I won't bore you a bunch about with licensing on this call, but if you reach out to your contact here at Bay State, we can talk to you about what you need to do to enable that in Power BI or anything else. I have myself have that and help me create visuals in Power BI, and it's great. It does an awesome job. So I love that feature, but just know there are additional things you'd have to add on to get that Power BI function. But you can get Copilot in Power BI on that question. But like I said, there's a ton of different workday efficiencies. And again, we're just looking at like Copilot for M365. There's so much more inside this AI field and agents that we'll talk about a little bit later that you can do as well. Anyways, from we talked about drafting those emails and the social contacts, and then get answers to those specific and detailed questions. We'll talk a little bit about what's researcher and analyst that can go even deeper on those AI tools to dive into those. But think about that. I have a ton of different data sources inside of SharePoint. I'm asking specific questions on that data from SharePoint to be able to answer something that I'm looking for. So instead of me going through all those documents, get a summary, and then still be able to see what it's pulled from to review to make sure that information is accurate. So this is just barely scratching the surface on all these capabilities that come with Copilot, and can be utilized on this side. But what I would say is a great place to start is just use your Copilot chat you already have available, right? It's going to be querying the web, but it's going to get you more familiar with the prompting we've talked about, be able to understand what questions fit inside the mold for what Copilot can answer, and then bring it down to the Copilot for M365 to start working on the data inside of your own tenant. Yeah, and this is what we talked about a little bit on this Copilot analyst and researcher. So this is, when you're utilizing Copilot chat with your Copilot for M365, this is where you're able to use those more specific analyst tools that Microsoft has pre-built to go into look at and do those different ones. So the difference between analyst and researcher, think of analyst as, hey, we talked about before, I have all this raw data, I want to take this into actual insights. And that's where you can go through and see all those different capabilities that potentially you will have. And this is something that you don't have to build agents. Microsoft's already built these agents before. I know I use analysts all the time when going through different spreadsheets, trying to get information from, lengthy documentation from Microsoft. They love to put out 300 pages of documentation, and you need about this much information from it. So it's a great way to help if you have similar situations. Think about researcher as, more of a multi-step project, right? I want to build my information and then take those next steps. That's how these Copilot agents are able to help on this side. And like I said, the great thing, they're already pre-built in that Copilot for M365, which enables that Copilot chat to help you on those different situations. Sean, is there something that you've utilized on either one of these before that you found really successful or helpful?
So I think what's helpful to note here is these are some good pre-baked agents that come out of the box, right? Just pop it open. Here we are, good to go. And these are some of the most immediately useful utilities that AI serves. I think personally, where I have found the most value out of AI is doing research, sprawling out, finding a ton of different sources, reporting back to me saying, hey, I searched throughout the internet, and in the researcher's case, it can grab from the Microsoft Index, which I'm not even going to touch right now, but because that's also complicated and frankly really cool. But finding a ton of different sources, being able to look through the sources yourself, verify if they're accurate, because AIs can hallucinate. They have not solved that problem yet. So I think something like Researcher and that kind of use case in general is one of the most valuable things you can do with AI, because it has saved me genuine hours of work having to go and find a bunch of different sources, put them all next to each other, grab the key insights from them. Really cool. And there are custom Copilot agents you can build as well. I think we have other information about that, but that is later in the slide deck. So.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks, Sean. That's awesome. And like you said, efficiency, right? Saving hours of time going through and doing something from as simple as, finding emails all the way to, doing those more complex research projects. That's our whole goal, is to, enhance the day-to-day workflow of employees inside of organization and find where the most value is on that side. But I think at all of these questions, and we said, at the start, how many different AI tools? We very scratched the surface there, and having 4, there's thousands, right? But really, it's why Copilot, right? And for me, a huge portion of this is, your business data being protected, right? Anyone who's going through in your environment and trying to access information using the Copilot tool has the guardrails of Entra ID inside of there. So the conditional access policies, right? So myself and Elliot Eliason at PAX 8 can't go into the finance files, find all the financials of our senior leadership, go through and publish those out, right? I can go get the information that I need to accomplish my job and not get too much on the other side. And it also helps that chat data is not saved as well as not used to train models when it comes to Copilot, right? So unlike other tools, especially important when you have that proprietary data inside your tenant, that's not happening. And also, I think Sean mentioned this a little bit before, transparent and current, right? On the end, there's citations when you're going through and searching on the web with Copilot Chat. Each of them have links to the information they're pulling for, so you yourself can go in there, double check that information is correct, and make sure that's happening. And same thing holds true on the work side, right? It references these documents inside of your SharePoint. You can make sure that those documents are up to date. They're within everything you're looking for to make sure that this is pertinent. But I think really security and business data protection is the biggest reason that I think I've seen people lean more toward Copilot than other tools on that side. Sean, would you agree on that side, or
genuinely, if I could think of the most, I'm being honest here. I'm always honest. If I can think of the most compelling reason to use Copilot, it just works. It's compliant, it's secure, and it can access your data without vulnerability of privilege escalation. It is a compliance nightmare to effectively implement AI. And with Copilot, you kind of just assign the license and it's more or less all handled for you. I couldn't imagine the amount of hours to build a system like this, a secure system like this that integrates with all of your data. I'm sure there's going to be a million different companies that integrate with your graph and fetch all your data and all that stuff. And it's provided by Microsoft. It just works and it's secure. I don't know. That's a pretty good sales pitch for me. I do love that.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah, I think this comes to kind of your side, like preparing your Microsoft environment, right? And this is where Sean's going to talk a little bit about this Microsoft graph, which is pretty cool. And I think you probably give one of the best explanations on this side. But really, again, it's just preparing your data, your sensitive data, to make sure that it can be used inside your environment, making sure those guardrails are in place. But Sean, would you want to expand a little bit about the semantic index and Microsoft graph? I know can get into the weeds a little bit, but I think it's really important to understand, like, why is this so important? Why does this matter, right?
I'm not going to deep dive here. I got to hold myself back. Hold me back.
I will. Gotcha.
But this is really cool. Maybe some people on this call have, maybe some haven't, started to do vector data stores, things along those lines where essentially you create embeddings, chunking of content. There is a ton of different stuff that you can do when it comes to building semantic representations of data. I'm not going to touch that. I'm going to just bring it to super high level here. Essentially, what this does is within the system, it is constantly indexing the data within your ecosystem with various tags around it, like, hey, this is a message. This is a meeting invite. This is the name of a chat. Here is a shared link. Here is a user that's available. Here's a SharePoint item. Here is an entry within, say, maybe even Power BI. All of that data across the Microsoft ecosystem is being indexed with metadata about what it is. And so all you have to do is say, hey, I was talking to Bill last week about, I can't even remember what it was, but like, can you help me find, because it's not in the chat. It will go through and essentially do what is sort of geographic isolation and narrowing. Like, think of a map, but it's complex vector space. All you have to do is ask that. It draws it right up, finds it, puts it in the chat for you, and you don't have to think about whether or not it's secure, whether or not you are allowed to have access to the chat. That's all handled in the backend. Honestly, it is a really cool piece of technology that they've implemented. I could also talk about the fact that these multidimensional vectors that are created and the way that graph space is sort of used and reduced. That's a whole separate subject and a very deep dive that I want to get into but cannot here for time constraints. Super cool.
Yeah, and I think that's what the great thing about, we're gonna have multiple sessions on the side. So those who want to look at more deep dives or get connected with you always can too, right? So Sean is more than happy to talk about this. I think we'll have more things coming on webinars, different sessions to learn here. Perfect. And then, I think this is the kind of the further iteration, right? We've talked about, things like Copilot Chat, which are just the web-based version, which are great to learn on, really your crawl stage of things. Copilot for M365, that agent, that assistant within sort of your applications is really kind of you're starting to walk. And then Copilot Studio is when I think you can really start to run as an organization. The reason why is because that is you creating agents to accomplish specific tasks. As we look forward on how this iteration itself will happen, I think it really starts with, hey, we're going to have your one employee working with this agent that's accomplishing this task, right? As I used before in my Midwestern colloquialism, that pass the butter task, right? It's going to do this simple thing each time, and it's going to have it, going through and doing these flows. As things, mature and you create more of these agents that are, set to accomplish those specific tasks inside your organizations, that's when it starts becoming, human agent teams, right? And start to think of those almost as, digital colleagues, if you would. I know maybe not that far, that gets into kind of a whole AI, discussion that's a little bit different than this, but, you're working with different AI agents that are accomplishing these specific tasks to accomplish a larger goal. And then a final iteration is, hey, we have a web of agents that are going through and accomplishing these tasks with limited human interaction, right? They're just coming through, checking on workflows, making sure things are running as they should. But again, that's a far down iteration on that one. Sean, I guess, what would your perspective of these bespoke agents on this side, either through Copilot or through anything else?
Yeah.
And is this kind of the evolution that you see as well, or where, have you seen some contrarian opinions maybe on this as well?
So with agents, it's really tricky. I think
It
one
is,
of the
yeah.
biggest issues with AI right now is it's non-deterministic. Because of the way that floating point numbers work in computers, genuinely the best research scientists of our day and age go, it's hard, because that is the answer. The way that floating point numbers are represented on computers is just not a finite representation. It is approximate. And because of that, you cannot always get the same input and output through these language models. They're working on it. But say you were to cast it to an absolute representation, now a model that might be able to produce 30 tokens a second can do 30 tokens a minute, and that might not be an acceptable outcome. So what I'm getting at here is these things don't always work exactly the same way every time, which is why it is really important to integrate with humans when it comes to any important decision making at the moment. And that's, I think, right now what's being figured out. You're also seeing on that last item there, human-led, agent-operated. That is what I think of when I sort of think of coding agents, which I don't think we are also going to be able to get into here. But these coding agents, Codex and Claude Code are some of the most popular ones. They are really in that category, and it's very cool where you set it off on a task, you give as much context as possible, it goes ham, you go and do code reviews and make sure that everything is hunky-dory, test pass. Agents are really complicated, really powerful tools that are so easy to do poorly. There's also going to be, I think, also the Copilot Studio mentioned here, and we actually did mention that a little bit, but it is difficult to implement agents, very easy to end up deploying something that just costs you money and doesn't do anything, but when done correctly, can be one of the most powerful tools at your disposal to take a language model from something that you just type into chat and it gives you a response to something working automatically and autonomously in the background for you, producing results while you're out sipping a martini. It's pretty cool stuff, delicate, and if done well, very powerful.
Yeah, I would say Mai Tai for myself. I'm more of a big guy, but whatever your choice is on your side. And I think another thing to point out too, I have this as kind of a linear progression, but I don't think that's certainly true, right? You could, find, hey, we get to this, kind of set of agents and this is working really well for us, or we go a little bit too far and it's not working well, we need to take a step back, right? There's a lot of those different things that are going to happen when you're going through and starting these creation on this side. But I do think, when, like as Sean said, when agents are successful, that's where a ton of return on investment, and looking at studies have been done, those are where you're seeing that 5 to 10%, a 5 to 10x return on investment is through these type of agents and in AI iterations. So thanks, Sean, for your perspective on that side. And again, just a little bit more on like these custom AI agents through Copilot Studio, through whatever you want to do, just kind of some ideas on what these different processes could be, making understanding, what potentially this could happen inside your organization. But there's just so many different options on this side. I think it's going to change depending on what your needs are on this side. Again, starts us all the way back from the beginning. What are your goals? What are the pain points you're seeing? And that will kind of lead you to what does it make sense to do on this agent, or in the future, where will this make sense? Yeah, like I said, I know, Sean, this is a tricky subject on this side, maybe a little trippy too. But where do you see on this custom AI agents with Copilot or anything else? I mean, what from your experience has
Yeah.
been successful for someone?
So the interesting thing about agents is if we distill it down, really down to the fundamentals of what it is, I just have some notes here that I'll read through. An agent generally observes the environment, decides an action to do, it acts upon that, sees what happened, updates its internal state, and then checks if a success condition has occurred. And what that could mean is, let's say, find that chat where I asked Bill something. We don't know what something is. We haven't been able to find that chat. It's probably going to find some candidates. And so the condition would be, let's get a little more specific. Find that chat where Bill mentioned the new project, right? So what's going to happen is the AI is going to say, okay, well, what can I do here? It's going to essentially look around the virtual space. Oh, I have a function that says list chats for this user. Okay, I'm going to list those chats. I'm going to get those chats. So first, list chats. See a list of chats where maybe a filter condition. We have Billy in the chat. List messages for that chat. Nope. Loop again. Okay, next chat. List messages for that chat. Loop again. So these things really, you can do a lot with them. You can design a lot of those different flows, and it all depends upon how you construct the available tools like listing messages or searching the internet or say running arbitrary code, which is something that can be done as well with code interpreters and things like that. There are graph builders and visual UIs like Copilot custom AI agents. You can also build AI agents through Copilot, through Azure with code as well. That is something that can be done. You can do it with OpenAI, Anthropic, with Gemini, Google, all these various tools. There is a whole can of worms to be addressed here, but if you can take, say, for example, in your specific use case, a constrained and specific scenario in which you want the agent to operate, you can do some pretty incredible things. Say, for example, let me think. That, it's difficult to know exactly what example to give because there are so many different people in different use cases of individuals on this call. But let's just say, for example, you wanted to, man, there is a lot of stuff you can do. I'll just try to make it general so it's applicable to everyone. You have some goal at hand that the agent can do. You give it a list of tools that are conducive to solving that, and you just let it run and then review the output. And if it is anything at all important, you can have essentially human in the loop, which means the AI agent, say, for example, it's fixing a bug in the code with a coding agent. You say, go and fix the bug. And right when it finds the bug and it's ready with the code fix, it says, excuse me, hand up. Can I do this? Like, do I have permission to proceed here? That's where a lot of magic with these AI agents can also happen, is because you don't want to let it just go ham. Can you imagine if you let an AI agent write code and deploy to production without any constraints or restrictions around it? You would have a lot of vulnerabilities, you'd have a lot of crashes, you'd have a lot of issues. These agents right now are best used when they're specific, tailored, and if it's going to do anything important, constrained by human action. There is a whole separate section that we could discuss about Copilot agents, the tools available. It's actually really cool. And why those are nice, because they just exist in your Microsoft ecosystem. But I don't think we want to deep dive on that just yet. Just know that when it comes to custom AI agents, know that you are the most valuable part of that. What? You, the individual, have the domain knowledge of what you're doing. You know specifically what's most useful to use in this scenario. And if you might be able to explain a process to a new hire or to an intern in detail, and you could put that into rules for an agent, you might be able to do half of your work by just saying, here is the task, go do it. Because you've already configured all the steps that need to happen. It's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great place to, turn it over and say, with all the different things we've talked about, from Copilot to preparation, how can Bay State IT help on this side? So I think on your side, give some different examples on, how do we take a next step as a customer, and where you guys can come in.
Yeah, so a lot of it is figuring out what you want this to do for you. How can this help you? Where does it fit into your workflow and your processes? And if that's something you're already aware of, we could help you get started. If you need ideas or are looking for ways that you think you could leverage AI in your environment, either way, reach out to us. You see our contact information on the page here. I'm going to paste it in the chat as well. And you can get in touch with us and we can schedule a meeting with you to go over what are your workflows, what are your systems, what are you trying to accomplish is the best place to go.
Awesome.
Yeah. And in general, implementing this stuff is difficult. It's headache inducing. It can be error prone. But when you have struck the right combination of attributes, the right configuration, it is just magical. Let me tell you, hours and hours and hours of my time has been saved by properly utilizing AI. And frankly, staying on top of this stuff is exhausting. It's like a full-time job just to be aware of the latest things that are happening. Oh goodness, literally a few days ago, OpenAI came out with an agent builder. Is it better than N8N? Is it worse? What does it do? They came out with an apps SDK. Now OpenAI can help me find a house through Zillow and create slide decks in Canva? What? If you didn't hear that this happened, I don't blame you. Things happen fast. If you don't stop and smell the flowers, you just might miss something. So maybe you don't have to be there and in tuned all the time. Maybe we can help. Frankly, as I'm sure you can tell, I'm reading this stuff all the time. I'm always up to date on it. And so we love to be able to share that information with you. Feel free to reach out if you're curious, have questions, have something confidential that you don't really want to put in a chat with a bunch of people you don't know. Feel free to reach out to us. Ooh, hold on. We got some questions here. And let's see. They're not getting an ROI on AI. Is AI worth doing? And how can you tell when AI is working effectively? So the reality is a lot of companies have said, oh gosh, what's my AI strategy? My stock's going down because I don't have an AI strategy. Okay, we're doing AI. We're doing AI right now. You're going to use AI. You're going to use AI. We're putting AI into everything. AI is going to be dealing with people's healthcare information, and your benefits are now decided through AI. And you know what? We're going to delegate the entire leadership process to AI. That's a bad move. Trying to just throw AI at things, I believe, is where a lot of people have failed with AI. Not having a strategic approach, strategic intelligence, is essentially the downfall of any implementation. I mean, if you took any tool, take a jackhammer. Okay, jackhammers are new. Jackhammers are cool. Every company that implements jackhammers, their stock's going through the roof. Well, okay, we're giving now Steve a jackhammer, and we're going to use the jackhammers to help us bake better cookies by, well, I don't know. Steve could take the jackhammer and like put it into like the cookie mold when it's dirty, and the cookie mold could get cleaned with the jackhammer. I don't know, man. Every time I see a company says we implemented jackhammers, their stock goes up. So we got to find some way to make it work. That's the wrong approach. Finding specific areas where these tools can help you, where fuzzy human logic is a really mundane process or a repetitive process, right? Say, for example, it's something that you have to do all the time, but it's just, is this, let's just say content moderation on a social platform. Does this post violate terms of service? That can be an exhausting and arduous process. A lot of these companies just take their entire community guidelines and terms of service, put that into the context window. Here's the post. Then it tells you whether or not. Let me tell you, paying a moderator is a darn lot more expensive than doing that process in, say, the medical world when it comes to sorting through a million different papers to find, hey, where is some relevant content about the thing that I'm currently working on? Having an AI model go through all of it, do vector similarity search, and give you results on that saves so much time. You don't have the AI model do the wet lab work for you. You don't have it decide whether or not a drug's going to pass into clinical trials, but maybe you use it for a bit of the mundane processes. One other key detail here, I think that study was interesting. I think a lot of what they did was asking executives if AI was working, and I don't know that AI is always the most helpful tool. Let me think of this carefully. So AI can be really helpful across the stack, but where we're seeing a lot of the most AI empowerment, separate from even this webinar, just being blunt here, is a lot of introductory people who might not know how to get started in the industry, who might be getting into a job and might be a little bit over their heads. Oh geez, someone just asked me what the flibber flab was, and if I've wingled the bat, and I don't want to ask them what that means. I'm going to look like an idiot if I ask them. And so they go and they ask ChatGPT, maybe against policy, hey, what's a flibber jab? Oh, a flipper jab is this, this, and that. You can find more about dinglebats on this place. That is really comforting for an intern or someone on a lower level. But the last thing they're going to do is say, oh, yeah, well, I just asked ChatGPT what it was, and here I can help you with that. They're going to say, just here I can help you with that. And so a lot of this work goes unseen, which is all the more reason that you should have these tools within your ecosystem, because the last thing you want is your brand new intern going in and using ChatGPT outside of organizational policies to get answers on something that they might be uncomfortable asking a coworker for. And so, sure, doesn't look like from the top down we're seeing a lot of progress, but maybe it's because not everyone's comfortable saying it.
Yeah, I think, Sean, you're like, I don't know if I can say any better than you on those ones, right? I think, like, if we look at that study from the executive level, a lot of them, just like you said, were like, we need to put a policy in place. They didn't take time to say, hey, what are our goals? What are the pain points? What are the kind of strategy do we have in place? And then on the flip side, if we look at studies that have, gone through and asked users of tools of this, how effective they feel more productive using this, the numbers are like 66 to 80% of people are saying yes, I do, right? So like I said, I think they're obviously want to turn on investment. I think there's just some flaws on that side, right? And I think you see those who are really successful have seen a ton of return on investment. So that's why we as Pac-State and Bay-State want to be a partner, right, to make sure you fall in that category of having success. But a lot of that is, how are you measuring that, right? How are you making sure that we are getting the return on investment for this tool, depending on those tasks we're on do? And that's where, I would connect with them, go through, hey, here's where we're having problems, here's where we want to potentially have things addressed, and that's where the team can help. I know I answered a Power BI question here. Anything else we want to say on this side? Oh man, I think Sean, you could probably talk for 3 hours on this, but what has you excited about AI, and what has you concerned right now?
So let's start with concern, because that one's fun and easy, right? I am so getting scammed when I'm in my 60s. I'm telling you right now, I cannot tell with like those Sora 2 videos. I can tell right now, yeah, but I gotta stare at it for a second, and I gotta squint my eyes and go, hold on, the side around their face is a little, I think that's an AI video. So I think that we have a lot to learn and figure out when it comes to sort of the social aspects of AI, the applications in, say, places outside the workplace, or when it comes to, say, scams and things like that. That is where I'm most concerned. I think we need to sort something out. I don't exactly know what it is, but we definitely have a little bit of an AI arms race when it comes to a lot of these things. And I am just hoping that we have some better tooling, so I am not scammed when I see or hear a phone call from what sounds like the voice of, say, a family member saying, I've been put in jail and I need $3,000 for bail. Just wire it to this Telegram account. If I can give you one tip for that, because that is a thing now, people can clone voices, people can, replicate individuals' appearances and their audio. Pretty crazy. The best thing you can do right now is a passphrase, a secret word. Find this person, find, frankly, probably several people in your family and, say, work, and authorize with a secret passphrase that you only say in person once. And frankly, say it kind of quietly. So say, for example, banana. I wouldn't necessarily use banana, but it's a good example because we were just talking about that. Having essentially a password or a passphrase can say, okay, well, it sounds like my grandmother's calling me and she's in jail. But grandmother, though she might forget grandmother, but let's just pretend she's got great memory. Grandmother, what is our secret passphrase? What do you mean, honey? We've never had a passphrase. Is it gazebo? You're not my grandmother. So that's kind of a good way to actually protect yourself against that. And then one other thing that you can do is A, don't trust phone numbers that you don't know, especially if they're calling. And then B, even if it is a phone number, you can do spoofing. So that's a whole other thing. There's going to be other stuff that we'll talk about with security and AI. There is a lot of freaky stuff going on. Those are subjects to be discussed in more detail. I wanted to start with the spooky, so Halloween relevant. We can go to the happy. I'm really excited about AI mostly because of how we can use it to do more of the things that we love. I know that right now, it's a classic thing to say, but AI is doing all of my art and music so that I can do the dishes. What do you mean? It was supposed to be the opposite. But there will be advances over time. There will be those machines in the future that can do that. For now, maybe you can have AI help you do your work faster. Maybe something that would have taken you hours and hours to research and find a million different high quality articles can be done just by using Copilot Research Assistant. Hey, find me 10 sources to answer this kind of question, and then you go and read it yourself. Saves you a lot of time. I think right now, my favorite thing about AI is I get to do more of the things I actually want to do and less scouring the internet for sources.
Yeah, I would agree. It lets you, have those like deeper thoughts on, hey, what can we do on this specific task or this challenge, instead of finding all the research, putting things together on this side, making something look pretty in Power BI or whatever it might be. So definitely agree with you on that side, Sean. What other questions do we have on this side?
Yeah, so it is too difficult to set up. I think that's like half of the argument A, to either use Copilot, and or B, to work with experts like us at Base Data IT. Yeah, it's really difficult because you need to deeply understand what AI is good at, stay on top of what AI is good at. Google just came out with the new Gemini computer use model. Maybe some people didn't know that. What is a computer use model? What does that even mean? It's a specially crafted model that is designed particularly for navigating through computers. Why is that useful? There is a whole decision tree of questions and unknowns that is just hard to wrap your head around. And so, in a lot of ways, just working with an expert, walking them through your day, maybe there's something that an AI would be perfect for that you thought, no way, I could never delegate this to someone else. It's too difficult. It's too involved. There's too many steps. It requires too much information. It's just hard to know unless you deeply understand the capacity and constraints of the systems that are currently available. And those capacities and constraints are changing on the daily. We have not seen this much growth, investment, and attention in an industry since the internet. And that is a whole separate conversation with that as well. But you are right, Russ. That is accurate. I am looking at other ones here. And yeah, you do also have to be careful in the AI you use for work so that it doesn't end up in the public. Oh my goodness. No, that is a whole separate concern as well. I mean, the conversation we have started here is so wide, vast, and deep. We can't possibly get to everything, but that is one of the more compelling reasons to just deploy a single tool that is unilaterally used across your company, or advocate to management if you're not a decision maker. Hey, I really want to use AI, but gosh, I do not want to get fired because, I was seen as using this tool, or say I used ChatGPT's website and I shared a public link, and oops, actually a lot of those public links are indexable on Google. And so now that public shareable link has my social security number and all of our intellectual property on Google. And now I'm both fired and I've been sued by the company for violating acceptable use policies. It is just easier to implement a tool like Copilot, only ever use that tool, work singularly within that, and then so many variables, concerns, security principles just get reduced to just open Copilot.
Exactly. Yeah, that's how to change it from that super Google to something that's, will be more effective inside your organization and see those returns, right? And like I said, I think you can see by Sean, you guys have a great team here at Bay State that can help address a lot of those questions, a lot of those setup challenges, to be able to make sure that, you do find that the valuable there. Go ahead, Sean.
I have one more thing. Tyler, please. I really want to answer that question, but I cannot just yet. It was essentially about how can we set up an agent together. I would have so much fun doing that. We could have maybe we'll have a whole separate webinar session just on like setting up Copilot agents, because it's a ton of fun, super powerful, super cool. You can connect a ton of different data, but even that would run us out of time, and we are hitting the wall here. I just want you to know that I did see that.
All right, and with that, thank you so much for joining today. Thank you to our speakers as well. That was very informative, great content that we were provided with there. We really appreciate everybody taking your time, and would love to hear any feedback, any thoughts you have about how we did. If there's anything interesting that you think would be a good example for future content for webinars, we'd love to hear that as well. So reach out to us, any questions, concerns, interest. You have our contact information. And it was great for everybody to attend, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.